The battlefield was silent, covered with smoke and ash. Only broken weapons and fallen bodies told the story of what had happened here. The war between humans and the alien clans had reached a point where every small fight decided the fate of many lives. Among the ruins stood a single human warrior named Kale. He was young, but carried the scars of many battles. His armor was scratched, his sword heavy, but his spirit was still unbroken. He had been separated from his unit, yet he refused to retreat. From the shadows came his challenger, a tall alien warrior with silver hair flowing like a river. Her eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, and her blade was curved and sharp. She did not speak at first, only watched him with a calm and cold face. Then, with a voice strong and commanding, she said, "Human, your fight is with me." Kale raised his sword, tired but ready. He did not know who she was, only that her presence felt heavier than the other enemies he had faced. Every step she took toward him felt like thunder. The ground seemed to answer her, as if the earth itself respected her strength. Their blades clashed, the sound echoing across the empty battlefield. Sparks flew as steel met steel. Kale fought with the skill of survival, each move fast and sharp. She, however, fought with grace, her strikes smooth and perfect, as if every cut was a part of a dance. He realized quickly that she was not a normal soldier. Her speed and skill were beyond anything he had seen. The duel went on, neither giving in. Kale's arm grew heavy, sweat falling down his face. Still, he refused to fall. He knew that if he lost, there would be no one left to stand in her way. But the alien warrior pressed forward, her strikes faster, sharper, almost impossible to block. Then it happened. Kale swung his sword in defense, not even aiming to harm, but simply to survive. His blade missed her body, but it sliced through the air and caught a single strand of her long silver hair. The thin strand fell slowly to the ground, shining in the dim light like silver dust. For a moment, silence covered everything. The alien warrior froze, her blade still raised, her eyes wide in shock. Kale stood confused, not understanding what had just happened. It was only a hair, nothing more, but the way she looked at him made him feel as if the world itself had changed. Then, slowly, she lowered her weapon. Her proud eyes softened, and her body bent down. She knelt before him, the ashes of the battlefield swirling around her. Her voice was no longer cold, but filled with something strange, something close to surrender. She whispered, "From now, my life belongs to you." Kale stared, unable to speak. He thought it was some kind of trick, some deception to catch him off guard. But her face showed no lies, only truth and deep tradition. In her culture, he would later learn, cutting even a single sacred strand of hair was not an insult. It was a bond, a vow stronger than chains. It meant that she had chosen servitude, that her life and honor were tied to him forever. The warrior inside Kale wanted to refuse. He did not want a servant, did not want this strange bond. He wanted only to survive and return to his people. But something in her eyes stopped him. Behind her strength, there was also pain, fear, and maybe even relief. He lowered his sword slowly. The battlefield was quiet again, no more enemies in sight, only him and her. The war had paused in this small corner of the world, and yet he knew his life had just changed. This alien warrior, who a moment ago tried to end him, was now kneeling at his feet, bound by a vow he did not understand, a vow that would take them both into dangers greater than any battle before. Kale took a deep breath, his voice steady but low. "Stand," he said, though inside he was unsure. She rose, still keeping her head lowered in respect. Her blade was no longer an enemy's weapon, but now a shield for him. For reasons beyond his knowledge, she had chosen her fate, and with those words whispered into the smoke, the duel of fates had ended. But the story of their bond had only just begun. The battlefield was silent after the duel. Kale stood in confusion, his sword still in his hand, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. Before him, The alien warrior who had fought with such grace now walked beside him, her head lowered, her steps calm. She no longer looked like an enemy, but something else, something he could not understand. They walked through the ruined land together, smoke rising from broken machines and burned trees. Cale did not speak at first, his mind turning with questions. Who was she? Why had she bowed? Why had she given her life to him after a single strand of hair had fallen? It made no sense to him. Not by human rules, not by the war he knew. Finally, he stopped, turning to her, his voice sharp. Tell me why you follow me. What game is this? She lifted her eyes, calm but serious. It is no game. Warrior, you have cut the sacred strand. Now my life is tied to yours. Cale frowned, his hand tightening on his sword. I don't need a servant. I don't need you to follow me, he said. But she only shook her head slowly, her silver hair falling like a waterfall over her shoulders. It is not a choice, it is a vow, one that cannot be broken. Her words were heavy, and Cale felt a strange chill. This was more than tradition. It was law written in her blood. She belonged to a people he did not understand, a people who saw honor and servitude as the same. To refuse her was impossible in her eyes. To break the vow would mean dishonor worse than death. As they moved further from the battlefield, Cale noticed how she walked close but never ahead, always a step behind, watching his back, guarding every shadow. It unsettled him, for he had never trusted an alien before, never believed one could walk with him instead of against him. But now here she was, her blade ready not for his death but for his protection. The night came, and they found shelter among broken walls of an old outpost. Cale made a fire, the flames dancing in the dark. The silence between them was heavy until he finally asked, "What is your name?" For the first time, her face softened. "My name is Saris," she whispered, the firelight touching her silver hair. Cale repeated the name quietly, as if testing it on his tongue. It felt strange, but not unpleasant. Saris sat close to the fire, her eyes fixed on the flames. "You do not understand what has happened, but you will soon. My vow is not for a day or a year. It is for life, even after battle, even after war." Her words struck him harder than any blade. For Cale, life and freedom were all he had ever fought for. To think someone had willingly given hers away unsettled him deeply. He looked at her, trying to see past the warrior's mask. She was strong, yes, but there was also something fragile hidden in her, something she tried to bury under pride and tradition. Cale realized that her kneeling had not only been about duty, it had also been about survival, perhaps even desperation. "Why me?" he asked suddenly, his voice low. "You could have ended me in battle, yet you bowed. Why?" Saris turned her gaze to him, her eyes glowing faintly in the firelight. "Because fate chose you. Your blade touched the sacred strand. No one else could have done it. Not by accident, not by chance. Fate bound us." Her answer gave him no peace, only more questions. But something about her certainty made him stay silent. He did not believe in fate. He believed in the swing of a sword, the will to survive. And yet, here she was, living proof of something greater than his belief. The night deepened, and outside the ruins, the wind carried distant sounds. Cale's hand moved to his sword, but Saris was already standing, her blade drawn. Hunters were coming. The sound of heavy steps and alien voices echoed in the dark. They had found her. They had tracked their lost princess. Cale looked at her, shocked. "Princess," he whispered, realizing the truth as he saw the fear flash across her eyes. Saris did not deny it. "Yes, I am of the royal line, and they will never allow me to remain by your side. They will kill you to take me back." Her words struck like thunder. This was no ordinary bond. This was a war waiting to be born. Cale tightened his grip on his sword, his body weary, but his spirit rising again. If they wanted to take her, they would have to go through him. The vow she had spoken was not only hers anymore. It had become his burden, his choice, his fight. And as the hunters closed in, Cale stood ready. The unbreakable bond had begun. The ruins shook with distant footsteps. Kale and Saris both felt the ground tremble as shadows moved through the smoke. The hunters were coming, relentless, trained to track without rest. They were not simple soldiers, but chosen warriors, loyal only to the alien High Council. Their task was clear: find the princess, capture her, and kill the human who had dared to bind her. Kale looked at Saris, his sword drawn, his voice steady. "Can we outrun them?" he asked. Saris shook her head, her silver hair glinting in the firelight. "They will not stop. They follow my scent, my energy. I am their mark. No distance will save us." Her calm tone carried a shadow of fear, though her eyes remained firm. The night grew darker as the hunters spread out, their armor glowing faintly in the gloom. They carried strange weapons, long staffs humming with energy, ready to cut through steel or flesh. Kale gritted his teeth. He had fought many enemies, but never hunters like these. His heart pounded, but he did not back away. Beside him, Sarah stood tall, her blade ready, her vow unshaken. The first hunter appeared at the edge of the ruins. His mask shone with red light, his voice deep and cruel. "Princess, return to your people. Do not shame your blood with this human." Saris raised her chin, her voice sharp as steel. "I made my vow. It will not be broken." The hunter growled, stepping forward, his weapon sparking. "Then both of you will fall." The battle began with fire and thunder. Kale met the first strike, his sword clashing against a glowing staff. The force sent him back, dust rising around his boots. The hunter was stronger than any soldier Kale had fought, but Kale's will burned brighter. Every strike he made was fueled not only by survival, but by something new: the need to protect Saris. Saris fought beside him, her movements fast and elegant, her blade carved through the air, every swing filled with precision. The hunters tried to circle them, to separate them, but each time one moved closer, Saris blocked, her eyes blazing with defiance. Her loyalty was no longer to her people, but to the vow she had spoken. The ruins echoed with the clash of steel and energy. Kale's body screamed with pain, but his spirit refused to break. He struck again and again, his breath ragged, his sword heavy. Still, he stood firm, never stepping back. The hunters snarled, surprised by the human's endurance. They had thought him weak, unworthy, but now they began to see something else: the strength of a human will. One hunter fell, cut down by Saris's blade, his mask shattering on the stone. Another pressed Kale hard, but Kale twisted his sword and forced him back. The night became a storm of battle, firelight mixing with shadows. Every moment felt like the last, but neither Kale nor Saris gave in. At last, the hunters pulled back, their leader raising his staff. He glared at Saris, his voice filled with fury. "You disgrace your blood. Princess, this human cannot protect you. The vow will destroy you both." Saris stepped forward, her voice strong. "You will not touch him. I am bound, and my choice is mine." Her defiance cut through the night sharper than any blade. The hunters vanished into the darkness, their retreat, not surrender, but warning. Kale knew they would return, stronger, prepared. This was not the end, but the beginning of a hunt that would never stop. The bond between them had drawn the attention of an entire empire. Now the war was no longer just about territory or soldiers. It had become personal, tied to them, to the vow that could not be undone. When the silence returned, Kale dropped to one knee, his body shaking with exhaustion. Saris knelt beside him, her hand resting gently on his arm. "You fought like no human I have ever seen," she whispered. Kale gave a tired smile, his voice rough. "I had no choice. You said this bond cannot be broken, so I fight." The fire burned low, the night carried strange whispers. Kale looked at her and saw not just an alien princess, but someone trapped between two worlds. A woman who had chosen chains to protect her honor. A warrior who now stood at his side, hunted by her own blood. Their journey was only beginning, and danger followed every step. Above them, the stars burned bright, cold and distant. Kale knew the hunters would return. He also knew he would be ready, for the vow had become his as much as hers, and no enemy, no empire would take it away. The night after the battle was long and restless. Kale and Saris had escaped deeper into the wastelands, leaving the ruins and broken fires behind. The ground stretched wide and barren, a land of cracked stone and silent winds. No cover, no safety, only the endless horizon that seemed to swallow the stars. Kale carried his sword close, his eyes scanning every shadow. He had fought hard against the hunters, but he knew more would come. They would not give up on her, not while she still lived, not while her vow bound her to him. He could not understand why they wanted her so badly, why the hunters had called her princess. He needed answers, and the silence between them was no longer enough. As dawn touched the sky with pale light, they stopped near the skeleton of an old tower, its stones broken, its shape leaning like a dying tree. There Kale finally spoke, his voice firm but tired. "You will tell me now, Saris, the truth, no more riddles." She stood still, her silver hair brushing against the wind, her eyes staring at the rising sun. "The truth," she whispered, as if the words weighed more than steel. Kale stepped closer, his frustration clear. "You are no soldier. You move like one trained from birth, but the hunters called you princess. Tell me who you are." Saris turned slowly, her gaze locking onto his. Her voice was steady, but a shadow of sadness rested beneath it. "I am Saris Valra, daughter of the High Bloodline, heir to the throne of the Astral Dominion." Kale froze, the name heavy in his ears. He had heard of the Dominion. Every soldier had. They were the rulers of the alien clans, the power behind the endless war. And now, standing before him, was not just a warrior, but their future queen. Kale's grip on his sword tightened, his mind racing. If that is true, then why fight here? Why kneel to me? Saris's face softened, though her words cut sharp. "Because of the vow, because you cut the sacred strand, you became my chosen. My life is yours, my honor tied to you forever." Kale shook his head, his voice low. "It was an accident. I did not mean it. I did not want this." But Saris only stepped closer, her eyes glowing in the dim light. "It does not matter in my people's law. Intent is nothing. The act itself binds us. One strand is enough to forge the bond, one cut strong enough to shape destiny." Kale turned away, anger rising inside him. He had fought for survival, not for destiny. He had carried his sword to defend his people, not to claim a throne or bind a princess. And yet, fate had forced this on him, chaining him to a war he could not walk away from. Saris placed a hand on his arm, her touch soft but firm. "I know you do not understand, but I will explain. In our tradition, the hair of the royal blood is sacred. It carries life and spirit. To cut it is to claim guardianship. No blade may touch it unless chosen by fate. And if one does, the bond cannot be undone." Kale's breath grew heavy, his thoughts twisting like storm clouds. "So that your people will never stop. They will hunt me until I fall." Saris nodded, her eyes filled with sorrow. "They will not forgive you. To them, you are a thief of honor. But to me, you are the one fate has chosen." The words felt like chains around Kale's neck. He looked at her and saw both a warrior and a prisoner. She was bound to him, but he too was bound to her, caught in a destiny neither had asked for. The vow was unbreakable, a curse and a shield at the same time. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the whisper of the wind. Kale finally spoke, his voice softer than before. "Do you regret it, giving your life to me?" Saris did not look away, her eyes steady as the stars. "No, I regret nothing, for you fought with honor, and honor is worth any vow." Kale felt the weight of her words settle deep in his chest. For the first time, he saw the truth. She did not see him as a captor, but as a protector. The hunters would return, stronger, fiercer, but together they would face them. The revelation of her bloodline had changed everything, but it had also given him clarity. He was no longer fighting only for survival. He was fighting for the bond, for the strange and fragile trust that had formed between them. The rising sun lit the sky with fire. Saris lifted her blade and looked toward the horizon. Kale stood beside her, his sword ready once more. Their paths were no longer separate, bound by fate, by vow, by the single strand of hair. The revelation was clear. The war ahead was no longer just between empires. It was between destiny and choice. And Kale had already chosen. The wastelands stretched endlessly, dry and cold under the fading sun. Kale and Saris had walked for days, their bodies weary, but their bond growing stronger. Every step carried the shadow of the hunters. Every night carried whispers of pursuit. Yet for the first time since the vow, Kale began to feel something close to trust. They found shelter in the ruins of an old human outpost, broken walls and cracked towers standing like skeletons. There, Kale's scattered unit had gathered, men and women who had survived the last great clash. Their faces lit with relief when they saw him. Their commander returned from death's shadow. But when their eyes fell upon Saris, their relief turned to suspicion. "Why is she with you?" One soldier spat, his voice sharp with anger. "She is one of them. Her people slaughtered ours," another hissed. Kale raised a hand, his voice calm but strong. "She saved my life. She fights with me now." But the words carried no peace, only more unrest. To them, Saris was an enemy in silver skin, a blade that should not be trusted. Saris stood silent, her chin raised, her eyes steady though their hatred burned against her. She did not speak in defense, did not lower her gaze. Kale noticed the weight in her silence, the strength of her pride. But among his people, her silence was taken as arrogance. That night, as the soldiers gathered around the fire, Kale heard their whispers. "She is dangerous. She will betray us the moment her people come. Why protect her? She is not worth the risk." Kale sat in silence, his hand on his sword, his mind torn between loyalty to his people and the vow that bound him to her. In the shadows, one man watched more closely than the rest. His name was Strand, a hardened soldier with scars across his face and bitterness in his eyes. He had fought too long, lost too much, his heart heavy with grief. And to him, Saris was not a bond of fate, but a chance. A chance to trade her for safety, a chance to bargain with the hunters and end his suffering. That night, while Kale slept lightly near the fire, Strand slipped away. He found Saris alone, sitting beneath the broken wall, her blade resting across her lap. Her eyes caught the starlight, her posture calm, yet behind it lay exhaustion. Strand approached slowly, his voice low. "You don't belong here. Alien, your people want you back, and they will pay for you." Saris's gaze did not shift, her voice steady as stone. "My people want my silence, not my life. They will not pay in gold. They will pay in blood, and that blood will be yours." Strand smirked, bitterness twisting his face. "You think the human will protect you forever. He fights for duty, not for you. If trading you saves the rest of us, then why should I not do it?" Before Saris could answer, Kale's voice cut through the night. "Because she is under my protection." He stepped from the shadows, his sword in hand, his eyes burning with fury. The fire behind him painted his figure in red light, his presence heavy with authority. Strand froze, his mouth opening to argue. But Kale did not let him. "You would sell your honor for safety, betray your own for comfort. Is this what we have become?" Strand's face twisted with rage. "You risk all of us for her, for an alien." Kale stepped forward, his voice sharp. "She is bound to me, and as long as I breathe, no hand will rise against her." The silence that followed was thick, the soldiers staring, torn between fear and anger. Saris lowered her head slightly, not in shame, but in quiet respect. For the first time, Kale had spoken not as a soldier caught in fate, but as a man who had chosen his side. Strand's hand moved to his weapon, but Kale's blade was already raised. Their eyes locked, the fire crackling between them. For a moment, Betrayal hung heavy, ready to spill into blood. But finally, Drin stepped back, his face twisted with hatred, his voice low. "You are a fool, Kale, and your vow will kill us all." He walked away, his shadow swallowed by the night, but the poison of betrayal lingered in the air. The soldiers looked at Kale with unease, some with doubt, some with reluctant trust. Saris stood beside him, silent as ever, yet her eyes carried a light he had not seen before. A light of loyalty, not from vow, but from choice. As the fire burned low, Kale knew the truth. The hunters were not the only danger. The real threat could come from within, from those who feared what they did not understand. And betrayal, once planted, never truly died. The night ended with silence, but the storm was not far. Kale stood watch, his sword in hand, Saris by his side. They were bound by fate, hunted by enemies, and now tested by betrayal within their own. The war ahead was no longer only against the Dominion. It was against doubt, fear, and the shadows of men who would trade honor for survival. The dawn broke with red skies, the sun rising like a burning wound across the wastelands. Kale stood at the edge of the ruined outpost, his hand on his sword, his eyes scanning the horizon. The night had been restless, whispers of betrayal still heavy in his thoughts. But the true storm was not within his men. It was coming from beyond. Saris joined him, her silver hair catching the morning light, her face calm, but her blade ready. "They are close," she said softly, her voice carrying certainty. Kale nodded, his chest tightening. He could feel it too, the weight in the air, the silence before thunder. The hunters were not far, and this time they would not come alone. The ground trembled as armored beasts moved across the wastelands, carrying the warlords of the Dominion. Dark banners rose against the sky, their symbols glowing like fire. The hunters formed ranks, their masks burning with red light, their staffs humming with energy. And behind them, towering in cruel armor, came the warlords themselves. They were giants of power, each step echoing like drums of war. Their voices carried across the land, sharp as blades. "Princess Saris, your time as a traitor ends. Return to us or die beside the human." Saris stepped forward, her eyes blazing with defiance. "I am no traitor. I chose my vow. I chose my protector. My life is mine, not yours." Her voice carried strength, but Kale could see the storm of pain behind it. These were her people, her blood, and yet she stood against them. The soldiers around Kale shifted nervously, some gripping their weapons tightly, some glancing at him with fear. The enemy was too strong, too many, and their warlords were forces no human should face. Drin's bitter whisper rose among them. "We cannot win this. We should hand her over." Kale turned sharply, his voice like steel. "No, we fight. If we fall with honor, but we do not betray." The warlords gave no more warnings, their hands raised. The hunters surged forward like a flood. The earth shook as the battle began, fire and steel clashing in a storm of chaos. Kale led the charge, his sword cutting through the first wave of hunters, his body burning with exhaustion but fueled by will. Saris fought beside him, her movements a dance of death, her blade striking faster than the eye could follow. Every hunter who came close was met with her fury, her vow burning in every strike. The soldiers rallied behind Kale, their fear turning into fire as they followed his lead. For a moment, it felt as if they could hold, as if the line would not break. But then the warlords moved. Their power was like a storm, their weapons glowing with energy that tore through stone and steel. One swing of their massive blades shattered walls. One step crushed the ground beneath them. Kale faced one of the giants, his heart pounding, his breath sharp. The warlord's strike came like thunder, Kale barely rolling aside, the ground exploding where he had stood. He rose quickly, his sword flashing, striking at the gaps in the armor. But his blade only scratched, the warlord laughing. "You are nothing human. Your kind will kneel or burn. Kale stood firm, his grip tightening. I kneel to no one, he growled, his voice cutting through the roar of battle. The warlord swung again, but this time Kale met the strike head-on, his arms screaming with pain, sparks flying as steel met energy. He was driven back, but he did not fall. Across the field, Ceres faced another warlord, her movements swift and deadly. She struck not with brute force, but with speed, cutting at weak points, forcing the giant to defend. Her eyes burned with the fire of her vow, her voice carrying over the clash. You call me traitor, but I have chosen my truth. I will never return to chains. The battle raged, the air filled with fire, screams, and thunder. Kale's men fell one by one, but each death slowed the enemy, each sacrifice holding the line. Kale's body bled, his strength nearly gone, but his will refused to die. He thought of the vow, of Ceres's kneeling words, of the bond he had never asked for yet could not abandon. That bond gave him fire, more than any weapon, more than any shield. In the heart of chaos, Kale and Ceres fought back to back, surrounded but unbroken. Hunters and warlords closed in, but their blades cut through, their spirits refusing surrender. Every strike became more than survival. It became defiance, a cry that humans and aliens alike could hear. This was no longer a simple battle. It was a war for fate itself. And as the sun burned high above, the wastelands became fire and ash. The final battle had begun, and neither side would leave unchanged. The battlefield was fire and shadow. The warlords pressed forward, their voices thunder, their power shaking the ruined earth. Hunters circled like wolves, their red masks glowing in the smoke. Kale and Ceres stood at the center, their backs against each other, blades shining through the storm. Kale's chest burned with pain, every breath sharp, every strike heavy. Blood ran down his arm, his sword slick, yet he did not fall. Beside him Ceres moved with grace, her silver hair streaked with ash, her eyes blazing with unbroken fire. Together they stood, unyielding, defying the fate the Dominion tried to force upon them. The warlords laughed, their voices cruel. You cannot win, human, even with her by your side. Your kind is weak, your blood worthless. Kale raised his sword, his voice hoarse but strong. Then you will see what weakness can do when it refuses to kneel. His words cut through the roar of battle, igniting the hearts of his soldiers who still stood. Their cries rose, fierce and desperate, carrying across the field. The hunters struck again, but Kale's men met them, their blades clashing with defiance. Every human who fell bought another breath, another moment for Kale and Ceres to fight. And still the warlords pressed closer, their strength like mountains, their fury endless. One warlord struck hard, his weapon smashing into the ground, the shockwave throwing Kale back. He hit the earth, his vision blurring, his sword slipping from his hand. The warlord loomed above him, laughter echoing as he raised his blade for the final strike. But before the blow could fall, Ceres leapt between them, her sword flashing like light. Steel met energy, sparks flying, the sound echoing across the field. Touch him and you face me, she cried, her voice shaking the air. The warlord snarled, his power clashing with hers, but she did not move. Her feet dug into the ground, her arms steady, her vow blazing brighter than fire. At that moment, Kale saw her not only as a warrior, not only as a princess, but as the heart of his fate. He rose slowly, pain screaming through his body, but his spirit stronger than ever. His hand gripped his sword once more, his voice steady. Ceres, we end this together. Her eyes met his, and for the first time since the vow, her lips curved into a faint smile. Yes, together. The battle turned as they struck in unison. Kale's blade cut with raw strength, Ceres's blade cut with perfect precision. They moved as one, human and alien, bound not by chains but by choice. The hunters faltered, their formation breaking under the fury of their combined will. Even the warlords staggered, their armor cracking beneath the relentless storm. The soldiers who remained rallied, their spirits lifted by the sight. For the first time, they did not see Ceres as an enemy, but as a comrade. Her vow was not only to Kale, but to them, to the fight they shared. Her defiance became theirs, her fire burning in their hearts. The warlords realized too late that the bond they mocked had become their undoing. The strength of one human and one princess, united by fate, outshone their power. Kale's final strike drove deep into the warlord's chest. Ceres's blade cut across the mask of another, shattering it into dust. The ground shook as the giants fell, their voices silenced, their shadows broken. Silence spread slowly, the hunters retreating, their ranks shattered, their will broken. The battlefield lay in ruins, smoke rising, bodies still. Kale stood with his sword lowered, his breath heavy, his body near collapse. Ceres stood beside him, her blade dripping, her face calm, yet filled with quiet sorrow. The soldiers gathered, their eyes filled with awe and disbelief. Strand too stood among them, his bitterness silent, his face pale with shock. None could deny what they had seen. A human and an alien princess standing together, unbroken, victorious. Ceres turned, her eyes meeting Kale's. In the middle of ash and silence, she knelt once more, her voice steady. From this day, until the last breath leaves me, my life is yours. Her words carried not only tradition but truth, not only vow but choice. Kale's chest tightened, his voice low but firm. Then my life is yours as well, not as master and servant, but as one. Together, the soldiers watched, silent, as the bond was sealed before them. No longer a secret, no longer a curse, but a vow eternal. The war was far from over. The Dominion would rise again, stronger, hungrier for blood. But Kale and Ceres had faced the storm and had not broken. Their vow had become legend, a story whispered in fire and ash, a story that would spread across worlds. And so, on that ruined battlefield, under the burning sky, their eternal vow was forged, not by fate alone, not by accident, but by choice, by will, by fire that no enemy could extinguish. The duel of fates had begun their bond, but the eternal vow had made it unshakable. Together, they would face whatever came, human and alien, warrior and princess, bound forever.